Welcome back, everybody. It is Wins Above Fantasy, episode 170. I'm Van Burnett, joined as always by Steve Gisueli. Welcome to those of you joining on the live stream. We're going to have a fun show tonight, pulling up some stuff on Wednesday. For those of you joining on the podcast, happy Thursday. And for the select few in my home league, happy draft day. Steve, we won't get into that. We're here to actually talk about breakout pitchers, following up from last week's show where we did hitters. It will be a lot of fun, man. This is always, especially in the last 5 or 6 years when the data has really surged and there's so much to look at with pitchers. It seems like kind of fishing for the next breakout pitcher is one of the coolest parts about being a fantasy podcaster, at least, if not, expert. I think we can at least start venturing that way. But I'm super pumped to get into it, man. Like I said, it's my draft day. I know TGFBI is almost in the books for us. Raz Slam fully underway. This is it, man. This is the pinnacle of fantasy baseball season, and I couldn't be more excited to talk about it. How's it going?
Yeah, this is it. This is some of my favorite time of year. We talk about it all year, seemingly, how amazing draft season is, and this is really like these next 2 weeks are just an absolutely amazing time to be a fantasy baseball nerd. I won't go as far as saying expert, but definitely nerd. That applies.
It's relative. I mean, to
Yeah.
my aunts and uncles, I'm an expert, but maybe not
Yeah.
to everyone who is tuning in or in the biz, right?
Exactly. Yeah, like I get texts from people that I'm close with, but that I talk to around this time of year, just getting excited for their drafts and getting ready for baseball season. So it's just an awesome time. And this episode specifically, I don't know if we've done like a breakout pitchers proper, but we've tried to hit on it, I guess, a little bit. But just today, like just throughout the day, I'm just thinking about how exciting I was about the show. It's just a super fun one to do. We always talk about like how, I mean, this website is Pitcher List, right? And we work for Nick Pollock and all of this amazing pitching information that's out there and know how to break down pitchers. So it's some of my it's probably my favorite process to go through at any time of year, evaluating pitchers to pick up. But specifically in this time, looking for deep sleepers, it's probably what I consider myself best at. And not necessarily even sleepers, but guys who could break out, guys who are going to give you massive value. And I think that we're pretty good at it. So I'm hoping that this list and these names are guys that are going to be people that will really help you win your league and have a advantage in pitching, whether you invest early or and load up on the back end and have a really deep staff, or hold off a little bit and still have a top pitching staff because you identify guys that aren't properly priced by the market because they could do more than what the market thinks they can do.
Yeah, turning SP4s into SP2s.
There you go.
All that good stuff. So we have format for the show. We have 4 picks from Steve, 4 from me, which is not to say that we won't love some of the picks that the other guy's talking about. The other thing about this, Steve, is looking back at like last year, you know what I mean? One of the most exciting things about this type of show is just the no dust statement that you don't know. I mean, even someone as like locked in to not only what's happening in the MLB and each of these guys' own personal stories, but the art of pitching. Nick Pollock is so locked in, and he doesn't bat 1,000. Like there's that element of surprise where like last year, so many people had AJ Puck on this list. So it's like, these are not all, going to be 8 for 8. Right. But I think if we can get, because you're not paying for that either. If we can get, I think 4 of these, 3, 4 out of the 8, then that's huge. What are you thinking?
That's absolutely,
that's a great clip. Right?
Yeah, the same sort of mindset that I have. And I guess we don't mean to say that, yes, draft these as your SP1s, they can't miss. There's no such thing as like a can't miss breakouts, or they really wouldn't be breakouts, if that made any sense, right? Like for every Garrett Crochet, there's an AJ Puck. So
yes, exactly. Well, without further ado, like Steve said, these aren't necessarily sleepers, but players like we talked about last week that will take a big leap in terms of their performance relative to their ADP. So we'll talk about the guys, kind of what we like about them. A lot of these guys, what they've been doing in spring, some of their prices are on the rise, and then definitely hit on the ADP for each of them, so you guys can kind of think through, do you want to reach around or too early in order to make sure that you got them. Some of these guys are starting to get really popular as well, but that's the fun of it. And yeah, beyond that, I think, Steve, do you want to kind of run through some of the 2024 ones? I mean, I know we talked about Puck being a miss, but there were plenty of guys that we were excited about that actually did hit. Last year was one of our best years since we've done the pod.
Yeah, I mean, the guys that come to mind, like Reynaldo Lopez, Jared Jones, Jack Flaherty, like guys that have been around can still be breakouts, right? Ryan Pepio, I think, comes to mind too. Garrett Crochet was obviously the biggest one. Hunter Brown, another name that comes to mind. That's also kind
Luis,
of
yeah, Luis Heel
Louis
was
Heel.
one.
Yep, that's another really good one that like had spring training hype. Like Jared Jones and Louis Heel were the two guys that were like, okay, this is happening in spring trading. They weren't necessarily on my radar before that. Then they became on everyone's radar and were great late run darts that returned a ton of value. In the case of Hunter Brown, that kind of shows that sometimes you have to be patient. Like
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure there was plenty of people that drafted Hunter Brown that did not reap the benefits of Hunter Brown, just because
Yep,
they cut him after what was
for
definitely an
sure.
unrosterable April. So sometimes they come right away. Sometimes they take a little bit, but there's these pitchers every single year. I think we have more data and can more easily predict these breakout pitchers with certain changes and all the data that we have. Whereas hitters, it's more of an inexact science, and that's kind of why I want to focus on getting guys that I can rely on based
Bank
on
on.
track record
Yeah.
and just you know a larger sample of batted ball data and things like that early on, and those guys are costly, so I'll spend my investments early there and then focus on this and there's a matter of trying to time. Okay, you could drop this person for that. Like I remember specifically last year in one of my one of my leagues, I dropped Jack Flaherty for Ryan Pepio. Like Flaherty started off okay. Pepio
Mm-hmm.
had like an early 10 strikeout game. And that was okay all in all. I think I would have probably been better not making that move, but
Mm-hmm.
you
Stuff
get
happens. Yeah,
yeah,
stuff
stuff
happens when
happens.
you're in the season, for sure.
And also, with starts, like you get so much info and so much data from one or two starts with a pitcher, right? Like, it's essentially they have 20 at bats, right? Whereas for a hitter to have 20 at bats, that needs to happen over 5 games. Pitchers do that in one, if they face 20
Yeah.
um, or plate appearances, if they face 20 hitters, right? So you get
Mm-hmm.
so much data and you could tell so much from small samples that, if you balance this stuff of what we look at and why we think certain guys are breaking out with what actually happens early on in the season, you can make some really informed and smart decisions to get a leg up in what is probably, the most important waiver wire runs and roster management time in April to sort of get those advantages. We talk about it all the time, right? Because you get that player all year,
Yep.
and there's also the most chances to add guys who are going to pop up and become impact players.
Spot on. And I think the other thing is if you don't draft these guys, it's still great to have this in the back of your mind for whoever added Jack Flaherty when you dropped him. Or, you know what I mean?
Hmm.
Just keeping tabs on these. The other thing about longevity, I think Nick's brought this up a lot this offseason. It's very true that like for a lot of these guys, they're going late enough in the draft that you don't need 160 innings out of these guys. Like if they help your team for 2 or 3 months, they've served a shift. Like you salute and move on to whether they get injured or whether it kind of blows up. Like you're looking to assemble the best stats over the season or week to week. So yeah, just all food for thought as we get into these. But without further ado,
And real
Steve?
quick, there's so
Okay.
many other
With
guys
further ado.
too. Like I have a long list of honorable mentions, and if you're in the stream and have guys that you want to shout out, there's so many other options too. It's like that awesome little piranha question we always come back to. Like identify a pool of these guys. Have a bunch of guys that if you get sniped on one, okay, you have another one on your list that you think could be a good breakout candidate,
Yep.
and take there. So like it's there's so many possibilities and guys who can potentially break out.
Very true. So Steve, who's starting here? Me or you? I know that's my job as a host, but how do we want to run
Oh,
it
you're
here?
you're putting the pressure on me. What do you think? I'll kick it off if you don't
Kick us
mind.
off with
Yeah,
number one, Steve.
yeah. This is not going to be a surprise to anyone. This is especially anyone that follows Pitcher List or reads the guys that we like to read for pitching analysis. Um, but my first breakout pick is Clay Holmes. I think he is going to be the next big relief pitcher to starting pitcher conversion success story, a la Reynaldo Lopez last year, a la Michael King. Um, I think that there's just a lot of good that's happening here. Friend of the program, former WAF guest, Lance Brodowski, was all over this even prior to the Mets signing him as a starting pitcher, that just shows you how amazing Lance is. Like the
Yeah.
fact that he could work for a front office, like I would think absolutely no problem with how good he is because he puts an idea out there, and I'm not saying that they took his idea, but that's
Right.
what front offices are thinking. He's on the same wavelength as some of the smartest guys in the industry. So shout out Lance. He did a great video on why he thought Holmes could be successful again before he actually signed as a starter. And that's because he has a pick Mitch that's capable, to handle both sides of the plate. That's righties and lefties, and that's what you need to be able to give length in starts. He did need some more swing and miss versus lefty specifically. Even in the postseason, he started to throw a four seamer a little bit. But what Lance hinted at and hoped that Clay Holmes would do would be to add a changeup. And the thing that he did this offseason was add a changeup. He added a kick change specifically. He worked with Tread Athletics. He tweaked his four seam, tweaked his slider. That already goes with that elite sweeper and sinker combo that he can use to handle righties so effectively. But yeah, the kick change looks absolutely devastating. He's throwing it a bunch in spring training. He is a pronator, I believe, and that doesn't necessarily lend itself to a normal straight changeup. So what you do with a kick change is like if I'm showing on your stream, basically it's almost like a knuckle curve where you pinch the ball or have your finger on top of the ball and you kick it. That's why they call it a kick change, and it basically kills some of the spin on the ball and gets that downward movement that a player like Holmes wouldn't be able to get on a normal straight changeup. So that all looks really, really good. His ground ball tendencies, I think, will play better in a larger sample outside of the closer role. I also think the fact that he blew a bunch of saves in New York last year makes him seem a lot worse than he is. A few runs, 2-3 runs in the third inning, isn't going to blow up his start if the rest of his innings are clean. 2-3 runs in the ninth inning when the Yankees had a 2-run lead was the end of the world. So I think that in the larger sample of facing the order 2-3 times through, that ground ball tendencies is going to play up better for him. I also think the Mets are a great fit, not only because their ballpark is amazing, but the Mets have been a 3 fastball organization. And by that, I mean they teach all of their pitchers a four seam, a sinker, and a cutter. And I think that's important because Clay Holmes, who may not have the greatest four seam or didn't at least last year, he actually improved it with the shape at Tread Athletics this year to have more ride and a better shape. But when you have 3 hard pitches, and what Clay Holmes will have now is a fastball, sinker, and a cutter that the Mets also implemented into his repertoire. A hitter can't just sit on one pitch if it's hard, right? They still have to make a decision on which pitch it is when it's a hard pitch. So that sort of mitigates maybe a subpar fastball. If you have 3 hard pitches, it keeps the pitcher, keeps the hitter honest, and may not be able to square up what is not an absolutely elite four seam or cutter.
Mhm.
And you can keep the hitter guessing there. I also think that lastly, he's had decent volume for a reliever over the last 3 years. He's gone 60 plus innings. He's been relatively healthy. So I don't think that, you can bank on him for 150 innings plus or anything like that, but I think he should be able to get to 120, 130, essentially doubling his workload from the last few years. So I'm excited. The spring stats look good. 9.2 innings, the 30 was 7.1% K percentage. All those pitches he's throwing, it looks really good. So I'm excited for Clay Holmes. I think that he has all the things to be the next success story from this reliever to starter here for me.
Yeah, it seems like, especially when you mention Raylo and Michael King, it seems like this has been like a successful path. I think Seth Lugo was the other one that I think it was Chris Towers saying he kind of was the prototype on volume, right?
Another really good, success story. Yeah, yeah.
And that was one that I think the first year of him kind of fully running, it was like in that 125, 130 range. So is that like kind of everything goes good for Clay Holmes? You'd take 130 if it comes with the ratios and strikeout rate. Is that kind of where you're
I,
thinking he'll end up, Steve?
Absolutely. I really,
Okay.
and I think Lugo was kind of the blueprint. He might have been like one of the first ones that was like, oh, they're going to make
Maybe with
Lugo
the Mets.
start. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
like Lugo now is the guy who throws 15 pitches, right? It's like amazing. It's like,
Right. Right.
you know, and Holmes seems like he has a feel for it, right? He
Mhm.
added not one pitch this offseason, he added 3 essentially with the four seam. Like he only threw like 15 of the four seams last year, and most of them I think were in the playoffs.
Mhm.
Added the change up and the cutter. Like it's clear that this guy is capable of at least attempting and should be able to handle that in my mind. So
Yeah.
I'm very, very excited about Clay Holmes
Yeah.
for 2025.
For good reason. And I mean, like you had mentioned, the industry is kind of with you on this one. So this is
Yeah,
one that you have to kind of watch, because at the start of February, Clay Holmes' ADP was 314 on average. And in March now we're up to 226.
226.
So
Yeah,
he's going
he's got
around
100
names
picks. Yeah.
of a lot of exciting pitchers, but I think that there's a really good case here for Clay Holmes. And honestly, Steve, he has not been that fixed on my radar as like a must grab in this range. But it's a great argument. I've just never like kind of dug as deep as everything you're talking about here with kind of the change in approach and lefties. He's got this thing where, despite the walk rate being reasonable, not great, because we'll get to another name tonight who has a great walk rate but is very hittable. You turn around and you're like, oh well, the whip, and I guess it's ground ball pitchers. And I know what you're saying too. Like in the ninth inning, sometimes that can be shaky times, nervy, or some hits kind of slide in, and your ratio gets bombed a little bit because you've only got one inning to go with it. Like you're saying, like luck will kind of balance out when you have a larger sample of innings in a way. But yeah, there's something to me that's it's interesting to watch the sinker, because it's like all of the secondary stuff has been really great in terms of whiff pitches. So it's good to hear that he's worked on the shape of that with like treads and everything. So yeah, I think this is a great one. Um, we had a question pop up in the chat that I just wanted to quickly address, because we don't have Reese Olson on the rundown, but the question came up on whether or not Reese Olson could break out. And yeah, this season the live comments are new, so we gotta entertain it too. So Reese Olson is going about 30 picks later at 253 in the month of March. And not to speak for both of us, Steve, but I think we view Reese Olson as a really good round out the rotation option with a little bit of upside. I think I've rostered him 2 seasons in a row at
Same.
times.
Mhm.
And last season I had him as kind of like my stabilizer SP6. The thing with Olson, I mean, it's kind of similar to Holmes, that like you're not getting the great extension, you are getting a good ground ball rate, you are getting the good walk rate. I think the question just becomes, without having a great fastball, it's what Nick always talks about is like the Wasker Enoa thing, is like he's slider first, which is a good pitch, but can you survive with no extension and a 94-mile-per-hour fastball? It's like a Nick Martinez thing. When you have a great changeup and a great slider, you're going to have some outings, like some game logs where you can accrue whatever it is, 8 strikeouts and have a game where it's all kind of clicking, 8, 9 strikeouts. But I do wonder, can he dominate for like a stretch of starts to leap into like SP2-3 territory, or is the ceiling a little bit lower just because he doesn't have kind of the raw goods of extension and high velo fastball where he can just like dominate hitters?
What if I told you Reese Olson is sitting 95, 96 this spring? Oh, you're gonna, yeah, that was like a live, almost spit out your drink there.
Spit out the drink. Yeah, I mean that's a significant jump. If he can hold that, like it's still like I've been in on that extension talk for a while, and to me it's that is the hard part. But 90, we always talk about how the jump going from, well, what is it? It's more like 93 up to 95, and he's been
because
at
like
94.
93 is like average now. I think the average for like a right-handed pitcher is like 93 and a half. So that's that, which is crazy to think about, just how hard all these fastballs are now. Like
right.
if you're throwing 94, you're like, yeah, that's fine.
Not bad.
You're a little bit better than average.
That used to be some heat on Ken Griffey Jr. baseball back in the old days. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe are you higher on Olson, Steve? Because I would like to roster him, but I'm not like chasing him in that range.
Olson is definitely a guy who's on my honorable mention list and easily could have been on this list for me, especially with the increased velocity. The slider is like one of the best sliders in baseball, like period. The changeup also, even though I don't think it was used as much as you would really like. Yeah, he did increase it last year, 22% of the time. Also a really good pitch. And like the changeup and slider, like they're beautiful, beautiful pitch plots. Like all of the red focus dots on like the Savant, heat map is down in the zone for changeups and like down and away for the slider. And the slider can be used to both righties and lefties. He does throw it to both sides of the plate, which is awesome. He threw 515 of them last year, 249 to right-handers, 266 to left-handers. So platoon neutral and a 45.5% whiff rate, whiff percentage on that slider. So when a hitter swings, they miss 50% of the time. That's crazy good. 43% whiff rate on the changeup. So he has the swing and miss pieces there. And it's just a matter if that fastball can be a little bit more useful. And at 95, 96 versus that 94, that's the sort of one tweak that you need to, to break out. And I really think with that, I'm very excited about Reese Olson.
He I'm warming up to it.
Qualifies as a breakout pitcher for me.
And he had the shoulder strain in the middle of the season last year, which you never loved to hear. But also when you look at kind of he was falling apart a little bit in June leading up to that. So a little bit of a narrative there. But if he can stay healthy and keep his rhythm, some of those months he put up, let's see, like in May, it was a 28 innings of a 0.64 ERA and a 0.79 whip. So like he's gone on runs where he's looked phenomenal. And I know that's where kind of the buzz started with Reese Olson. I think he's a little bit me guilty as well. He's kind of a sleepy name with how many other names are around him in that range.
Yeah, I think he's kind of been like a guy waiting to break out and like slightly disappointing or never really happened that, like it's like, all right, we're doing this again. But I think Olson's a guy to pay attention to. An interesting comment that I brought up from W in the chat that Reese was the last qualified starting pitcher to give up a home run last year, like 2 months in. I remember that. There was a really, really long stretch where he just did not give up a home run. And I guess when you're that much of a ground ball pitcher, pitching half your games in Detroit when it's cold, you may not give home runs for long stretches. So I think it's possible. I think he's a good call. So great shout out for
nice cameo one there.
Olson there. Yeah.
Well, speaking of the third ground ball pitcher that we're going to talk about, Christopher Sanchez is the name I wanted to bring up, and he's one that is also surging up draft boards. He is going 20 picks earlier in March than he was in February, with an ADP of 165. So you're investing at this point. This is probably like SP5 territory. Um, to be honest, Steve, you had heard my pitch all off season about Fromber and being just kind of innings eater, stabilizer. And I had viewed Sanchez as like a poor man's Fromber, left-handed pitcher, sinker change breaker. Um, Granted, with Fromber's got the elite curveball and Sanchez has had the slider, but both great ground ball rates. And Sanchez, despite being a guy who came out of relief, he has turned himself into an innings eater and very efficient with that sinker and being such a ground ball pitcher. The main knock on Sanchez, which is why we've all kind of looked at him as this oatmeal-y, I don't know, like an Erod type of mold, is the strikeouts just haven't really been there. But that's where this season, this spring training, he has a lot of people's attention because the velo has jumped from 94.5 up to 97 miles per hour on that sinker. That's faster than Zach Wheeler. That's faster than Josh Hader. There's I think a Sports Illustrated article that's wondering if it's too fast and lead to harder hits or his arm falling off. But the interesting thing is, even last year, the 94.5 on the velo was 2 ticks up from 92.5 the year prior. So it feels like you're kind of on this roller coaster with Sanchez, but if you can pair all of it together, because I should have mentioned, so far in spring, it is translating to strikeouts. So he's got 12 Ks in 7 innings, and he now has a dominant fastball. He has a good slider, good changeup. Ground ball rate is solid. You kind of look at all this stuff together with the innings, and Philly's a good team behind him, and you're kind of wondering, like, oh, the other thing is he's introduced a cutter in the offseason. And I did hear Nick talking about how he wants to see the cutter more. And I think in spring so far, the two games he's gone out, it's been like at a 10% usage, but even that is above like a show me pitch range. Like, I think if you're in double digits on usage, that's, in my opinion, like a pitch you're comfortable with. He worked on a cutter last season. He wasn't comfortable with it. He didn't throw it. So it's something to watch for sure. But if he's added a cutter and all this velocity, I mean, this looks like the recipe for, I'll say, like an ace. And that might be a little far out in front of the skis. It's farther than Nick likes him. And Nick does like him, but he's kind of said like, oh, well, he doesn't have the same upside as, like a Robbie Ray or something. Like, I wouldn't be shocked just looking at who he's been and what he's becoming if Sanchez took like a major leap and was SP1-2 type of territory if all of this stuff is true. Now, granted, short sample, he has to hold the velo, but I'm pretty excited. I actually have him in both TGFBI and Razball, or the Raz Slam. So yeah, I'm in on the train, Steven. We haven't talked about him a ton on this show, so wanted to hear where you're at.
This reminds me of another former Philly pitcher that you liked. He didn't break out in Philly, but you were all over it, and I think that it may have similar upside to him. I'm curious if you can guess who I'm talking about.
Oh man, is this early in our show days
No,
or late?
like within the last 2 years.
Oh, you're gonna hit me with an Eflin on this
There
one?
you go. There you go.
Is that a
There you
bad
go.
thing though? Is
No,
that a bad?
I just think that that's me. Like Eflin had a few, and he was still good last year, and I think he's
Yeah,
still a
he had
fine
that
pitcher
one
now.
season. Yeah,
He
where it
did
was
really have. He
elite.
had a really really good season. What, in 2023, I believe it
Mhm.
was, with the Rays, or maybe 2022. That's kind of the upside of what I picture for Sanchez. I tend to stay away from these kind of guys that have these low K rates, but if the velo's up, maybe you can get that back up to the 24-25% that he had in 2023.
Mhm.
And that's I think a really nice place for him to live with that 57% ground ball rate that he's run for the last 2 years. Yeah, Nick Pollock's been saying it's the year of the cutter, so that would be awesome if he was able to incorporate it more. One thing I will say, just to kind of throw cold water on a few of the things that we've talked about, velocity wise, like Sanchez has 7.2 innings so far in spring. Like that's
for sure.
that's he went 8 innings, I think, a few times last year. That's possible for one start, right? So a lot of these times these guys can be airing it out in small samples. So we'll just have to see how these velocity trends stick, especially as they get later in spring and start throwing 4 or 5 inning outings in their last 2 outings. In the last two outings of spring, and then see how it sticks in the real game environment early on. But
one
that,
thing I missed on the velo note though, Steve, is compared to Reese Olson or Clay Holmes, who don't have the extension. Christopher Sanchez does have that 7-foot extension, so that
when
to me is like
when you combine extension with velocity, which is the next guy that I'll talk about as my breakout pick, that's how you get a really, really elite fastball, like no matter the shape.
Right, just overpowering hitters, which is a tempting thing. So that's Christopher Sanchez. Again, ADP on that is, what is it, 165 in March. So do with it what you will. Steve, I'll turn it over to you for the next one here.
All right, so my next pick here, I'm going to go with Gavin Williams, another guy that all of our favorite pitching analysts, Saris, Lance Brzezowski, Nick Pollock have been
but
all over.
To interrupt rudely, Steve, who did we grab on the too early mock draft in October, right after the season?
Pre-hype, yes.
Pre-hype. We were there. We were there.
Okay. We started the Gavin Williams hype train. So there you go. So this is exactly what we were talking about with Sanchez. This is elite fastball velocity and elite extension. Like if you have those things, your fastball is going to play up. He has the second quickest fastball to the plate. So like actual seconds for the ball to get to the plate because he releases it so closely with that extension and has that elite velocity. It's only behind Garrett Crochet. He's tied with Jared Jones, 2 guys that fastballs, like you watch them and hitters just look totally lost versus fastballs that go right down the middle. That's a reason why, because they have elite extension and elite velocity. So that is a building block. Like that's almost like that's probably what I would take for if I was building a pitcher from scratch. Like that's the trait that I would want to start with. That's what Gavin Williams has. He's now throwing 3 breaking balls this spring. His extension is slightly down. I think Lance Brzezowski noted that it was about 5 inches or so down, which it isn't great. It may not be like that 97th percentile extension that he had, but there's still room. Like that's still really good and would be like 90th percentile extension, even with that. But with his extension down, he's getting better ride on the fastball, so it's got more IVV, and I think that's a fair trade. And that might be the tweak that makes things click. And it's worked so far in spring. In 8 innings pitch, he has a 50% strikeout rate. So he's struck out 50% of the batters that he's faced. I know, small sample, just the 8 innings. With just a 6.3% walk rate, a 16-2 K to BB ratio, and a 0.88 whip. So I think he's only given up like 1 hit, or maybe he hasn't even given up a hit with those 2 walks, with a whip that low. So I am very excited about Gavin Williams. Last year he battled knee injuries. I think he also had battled shoulder injuries, which isn't ideal, but he was just a little banged up basically throughout the whole year last year and really could never get in a full groove. So I am super, super excited about Gavin Williams. I want him everywhere. I know the hype is going a little bit with him as well, but you still can get him for a decent price. In March, he's going at pick 212, the 79th pitcher off the board. So I have quite a bit of Gavin Williams shares so far this year and hope to get more.
Yeah, he's flashed it. And I think it's not even pushback, but it's consideration that kind of process versus results. I know that despite what basically, if I go back to our justification of him when we took him for the too early mock, it was great velo, great extension, needs to improve control, and needs to find that second pitch. And in spring, he has not really demonstrated all this dominance from a second pitch necessarily. It has just been powering hitters over with this fastball. Like, so much of it has come from the fastball, which is great. And like you said, I mean, it's like extension and a good fastball is
That's
how
what Jared Jones did, right?
and
Yeah.
Logan Gilbert was the
Yeah.
one that it's like, oh, all we need is that slider to come through, or the curve for Gavin Williams. The cutter as well.
If
He
we want
only
to get
throws
hot
12
takey here, like bold prediction, like I think Gavin Williams could be Logan Gilbert. Like that I think is a good comp.
Yeah, and I think it's all there. It's just when you look at the spring line, and I know this is where Nick's been at as well. Drink when we say Nick, but in the in the spring training, it was like, this is brilliant, but I would have loved to see the other pitches as part of this mix. But it's not to say that they're not there. It's just you want him working on it. Who knows? Maybe he's saving it for when the season actually starts. So, okay, we're 2 in plus a bonus 1 on Reese Olson. We are going to get to more names after this ad break. Okay. So jumping back in, I think 3. So we've had Clay Holmes, Gavin Williams, a cameo for Reese Olson, and Christopher Sanchez. My next one, while it's a name that everyone's familiar with, at least I have not heard as much hype train as some of the other ones around it. And that's Spencer Arrighetti. And he's another one that we talked about. I think it was on our Christmas episode as well. We were looking at pitchers after pick 200 because Arrighetti is currently going at pretty much 202. So a few picks before Gavin Williams.
So he's not really post 200 anymore. So I guess we were a little bit right on that, at least for the hype train. Yeah,
we're in the 200 to 300, and he didn't get moved up out of that. But there's just things that I like about Arrighetti, and the pitch arsenal is one of them. That he has 5 pitches. Yes, it's the 94 mile per hour fastball, but it's 7'2" extension. Has good stuff on the slider and the curveball, and we saw it last year. Like, I think I'm a little surprised for how much Arrighetti was kind of taking all the fantasy Twitter and your text threads. Whoever picked him up, everybody was hyping him up, because he was dominant for stretches last year. Had 13 strikeouts against the Red Sox, 11 versus the Phillies, both of those in August. I thought that he would be a little bit pricier this offseason. And to me, I think the balance of his upside with how mature, it's almost like he's 100 pick later Schwellenbach a little bit. And I know when you hold the two side by side, there's more holes you can poke on Arrighetti, mainly with like the command. But there's something about like that. He's got enough, he has all the weaponry to do it. And Houston has done this time and again with pitchers. Like, people forget that they turned Garrett Cole into what Garrett Cole was. Like, they get the most out of their pitchers, whether it's Fromber, whether it's Lance McCullers. Like,
people thought Verlander was cooked before he went back there, right? Yeah.
Yes, and it's like, I think we don't really bake that in to their evaluation, when I think that like he has the mentorship to where I think if you have all those tools, you have 7'2" extension, you have 5 pitches, you have a slider, you have a curveball. I think that second half we saw from him of a 3.18 ERA and a 1.17 WHIP is not a mirage. Now, that might not be what we're going to get for 160 innings or something, but he made changes last year. The command improved. The walk rate dropped in the second half from 12 to 8%. Also, some of it was dumb luck for how much he got rocked in the first half with the 5.63 ERA. His BABIP was 3.44 in that first half. In the second half, it went down to 2.88, which is a little bit closer to league average. But he used the changeup more. The changeup looked a little bit different, and the whiff rate jumped on the changeup as well. So all of those were looking like intentional improvements, I guess. And yeah, that's when I look at this group, I think that Arrighetti is another one that he just has all the tools. It's just he's got to improve the control, and he's got to do it for a full season. But I don't see a lot of issues in that argument. And as long as I have a stable floor, I would gladly take an Arrighetti over Zach Eflin, which is the pick right after him, or a Taj Bradley, certainly with Steinbrenner and the humidity and everything. So Mackenzie Gore's in that area too. Like I like Arrighetti this year. I hope I get some shares. I don't have any yet, but yeah, open to your thoughts on that one, Steve.
I think it's a good call. I think the thing that stands out to me is the fact that Houston is still this great pitching organization. Look at what they did with Kikuchi last year, right? Like they took what was an up and down and streaky hit pitcher, tweaked his arsenal and turned him into an ace for the second half, and then he got paid. And I think there's still a good amount of hype around Kikuchi with what he did there. And a lot of it was those changes that happened with the Astros. So I think, we're starting to see the cracks in some of the Astros dynasty, and there's, a different regime, and you hear some of these, takes that may, seem like they're not as advanced as they once were. But I still think that this is their bread and butter, and they're good at getting the best out of these pitchers. And, they essentially fixed Hunter Brown last year. They fixed Kikuchi last year, and they fixed Arrighetti, who was pretty brutal in the first half of the season too.
And got a lot from Ronald Blanco. I mean, he doesn't have all the tools for that.
So I am a little bit concerned about the command. The 26% walk rate in 6 innings so far in spring training is slightly concerning. I know that we highlight the impressive metrics from the small samples in spring. We need to talk about the ones that aren't concerning, especially for someone that has had a walk problem throughout the minors and at certain points last year. But who knows? That always could be something that he's just working on. That being said, I'm more or less in on Arrighetti, and I believe in him as a pitcher and the stuff, and think that he can definitely take another step and become I think he's truly could fit that mold of SP5-4 that becomes like an SP2-3 this year. And he pitched like that for stretches last year. So I'm in on Arrighetti.
Yeah, and
I have 2 shares already too. So
very nice. Very nice. Yeah, the 145 innings is something we didn't mention too, which is a little bit more of a innings floor than some of the names we've talked about. Sure. But that leads to kind of a question that was in the chat. Since these guys are around each other, Steve, Clay Holmes, Arrighetti, Gavin Williams, Shane Baz, they're all in a zone. I feel like you would go Gavin Williams at the top of that. Is that fair?
I think I would still go Baz.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Maybe that's Alex Chamberlain still in the back of my head, the Shane Baz, no matter what. But I really think that he has the highest ceiling, and maybe I'm still going off of 2 years ago, 3 years ago hype, with how electric his stuff was coming up. But I'm still a believer in it, especially because he was so successful last year in that limited stretch without the elite strikeout stuff that he showed in the minors. I think that still could come from him. But after that, it would be Williams for me, then Holmes, then Arrighetti. I believe would be my order on that for.
I think I actually put Baz at the bottom, not for the player, but for the fantasy outlook. Like I'm concerned about the volume. I'm concerned about the ballpark.
Good point.
The team context overall. Like I think Arrighetti might get you 160 innings. I think Baz is like gonna probably be capped around like a 125, 130, maybe not. And the ratios will look a lot better, but I think that volume is such a big swing. And yeah, you're convincing me on Holmes. Williams is an interesting one. But I think just because he is the easiest one to envision being like an SP1, you have to give that ceiling at this stage of the draft. So I think I would probably go Williams, Arrighetti, Holmes, and Baz would be how I would rank those. But nonetheless, pick 200 is a range where I'm very happy
Yeah,
to draft any of the
that's
four I look at.
you set your queue with those four guys. You wait and see who falls, and you take one of them there. Yeah.
Yep. All right, Steve, you're up. Who you got next for your third?
All right, my third breakout pick for pitchers for 2025 is another popular name that's like a wide awake sleeper, as Paul Sporer would call them. That's Max Meyer, one of two Marlins as a tease on my list. Um, and sort of that format of what you did with Sanchez, like what he was. He was an interesting prospect with an elite slider and not much else. Now he's throwing 2 ticks harder in spring training, a lower arm slot, which Lance Brzezinski wrote him up. A lower arm slot usually means less IVB. Or sorry, this was TJ Stats, another one of our friends, who wrote up Max Meyer early in spring. And a lower arm slot usually means less IBB, so less ride on the fastball, which is a worse shape, and generally speaking. Um, However, when he lowered his arm slot, he gained those 2 ticks of velocity and also increased his IBB, so more ride. The fastball is rising more than the hitter expects from a lower arm slot. That creates unexpected movement. The TJ Stuff Plus went from 92, which is well below average fastball, to 102, which is average. Which you may go, yeah, average. That's not great for an average fastball, but that doesn't matter because his slider is that good. We talked about Reese Olson having potentially the best slider in the league. Max Meyer could rival that. He's now throwing the slider 2 ticks harder. That's one of the hardest gyro sliders in the bigs. His changeup now has more deviation as far as movement from his fastball. And as a lefty, I believe Meyer is a lefty. Correct me if I'm wrong.
He's right-handed.
He's righty. He's a righty. But that separation is something that few pitchers can get with and pair that with a harder fastball and that elite slider, and that's something that could make up a really really interesting pitcher. He's also throwing a sweeper now, which has been a very small sample, but per TJ Stats, it has laughably good traits and was graded unbelievably on his Stuff Plus metric. I think it was a ridiculously high score from looking at his player card. It was like a 160 or something like that. It was only a few thrown, but he had the elite traits of potentially having another slider. And Eno Saris talks about this all the time. Some guys can just spin it, man. Like some guys know how to spin the ball and throw these elite sliders. And like, it wouldn't be surprising that if, Meyer had this elite gyro slider, that harder, tighter slider, which is good because it's platoon neutral, but it wouldn't be surprising if he could also pick up a sweeper just like that because he has that much feel for spin.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes, those guys don't necessarily have the capability to throw a good fastball, which previously Meyer didn't have that. But with 2 ticks of velocity on the fastball, better shape, better arm slot, that leads to the increased velo and shape. This looks like an exciting breakout waiting to happen. Marlins also totally revamped their pitching development and pitching team from their end, so I'm super excited about what they're doing there. I am all over Max Meyer as a breakout for a pitcher for 2025.
I've heard the buzz, and
There's a lot of buzz on Max Meyer.
there's buzz. One thing I heard that made me feel better was that this new arm slot was actually the slot he threw all in college. So
Yes,
that makes
that's a
me
really good
happy
point
that
there.
it's kind of like he's coming home and not just like tinkering and trying with something he's going to lose a feel for. I guess my question is regarding the slider being so elite, just from basic like scanning, it doesn't have like the RPMs that like, when you see a top slider and it's like 2,800 or like 3,000 RPMs, his is like 25 and change. And it doesn't look like there's a ton of, at least from last year. And maybe that's the problem is I'm looking at just last year on like the IVB or the horizontal break. None of it looks insane. And the whiff rates look pretty good. but for sliders, they're supposed to be up there. So my question is, if the fastball is getting, and no doubt he's an interesting name because like you said, the velo on the slider, I think is a huge deal. Like to have a slider that you're throwing at like 89, 90 miles per hour is dangerous. And maybe all of the hype is just on this new slider, but at least looking at conventional metrics, I'm having a hard time figuring out like, what are we pointing to that we're saying is one of the best sliders in the game type of thing. Cause yeah, like batting average was normal. The whiff rate was like good, but not great. So that's kind of where I'm at, is like, I if I'm going to gamble on somebody that we have no track record on, and like other than him getting kind of blown up, and that's fine. We saw that with like a Corbin Burns and stuff, right? Where it's like they have all the hype, and then they've got like a 6 ERA, and then suddenly they turn into an ace. I just am having trouble seeing the story of the slider in a way.
Yeah, I'm pulling up the TJ stats stuff plus metrics. It's a 106 slider based on that
So
metrics.
it's
And
a
yeah,
big stuff pitch. Yeah.
I mean, it does have, at least in spring, more RPM. It had 2,600 RPM in his May 3rd start. So this was like probably one of his first ones for spring training. Yeah, this is something that I think, even though it may not have that elite movement, it's like a tight gyro slider that's hard, that he can command. When you do have a gyro slider like that, it's platoon neutral. It's not like a sweeper where you can only throw at the same handed hitters, or
Yep.
like looks
Gotcha.
like a frisbee to the other hand. So I
Yep.
think that's kind of where the hype comes from, and like scouts have been impressed with that pitch, where maybe it hasn't shown yet in some of like the overall numbers that we see on a Savant page or pitcher list page, as far as like run value or things like that with the slider or overall whiff rate. So I think a lot of it's based on like scouting reports, which I know is software analysis and not necessarily something that's our specialty on this show.
But also, it's a diamond in the rough find, because the
Yeah.
ADP is 384 on this as well.
Yeah.
And like, you don't have to go that deep into drafts before you're in the range where you want a guy that's basically a rental. Like, you're like, how long, if you drafted Max Meyer, Steve, how many bad starts would you hold on to him for?
maybe one.
That's what I'm saying.
Like
it
might be like, and Nick talks about this all the time. Like, guys like this are important to have in season, because they're guys that you can drop for the next hot thing that we may not have on this breakout list, that was pitching on the backfields or was just doing something differently in spring training that we didn't have, wasn't on our radar, but you could add him for these guys. Having roster flexibility is important. Especially in like our daily home leagues that most people play.
Well, I mean, I think that is the story for at least two of the last three we'll get to, but we're going to take our second ad break, and we'll be right back after this. Okay, so I'm up, Steve. I had Christopher Sanchez, Spencer Getty, so this is my third one. Going with kind of an 80 grade name here with Jackson Jobe, one that it feels like is almost post-hype breakout pick here, because how often can you be like a top 5 prospect and still be sitting at it like an ADP 246? Like, it feels like we usually push these guys up so much, whether it's a Grayson Rodriguez or whoever it is. But Jobe, it came with some good reasons. So last year in the minors, across 3 stops, Jackson Jobe had 91 innings of a 2.36 ERA and a 1.12 WHIP. But the strikeout rate at 25.6 was where people were kind of scratching their head, saying like, it seems like he should do more. He had his cup of coffee in the majors, and it wasn't impressive in terms of like swing and miss stuff. And yeah, that kind of left us in the offseason wondering what to make of Jobe, because you're like, okay, he has kind of the pitch grade stuff, and he throws really hard. I think it's like, what does he sit 97? but he doesn't have the extension. He doesn't have like a killer secondary. So it just left room for kind of blind faith in the prospect pedigree up until spring, in my opinion, where basically he's added a new curveball, which has been heralded by some scouts. David Adler from MLB.com said that it was definitely one of the top 15 new pitches seen this spring across the league. It has a 3,000 RPM spin rate, 14-inch of vert drop, 12-inch of horizontal break. That's comparison to very similar to like a Fromber, like a great curveball has those same type. I think Fromber might be 15 inches of vert and 12 on horizontal break, but 1-inch difference. And yeah, the reason why Job has introduced this curveball, he was quoted talking about how this was to put away more batters. He felt that he recognized he needed to put away pitch, which is always a great thing when you hear from a pitcher that they are working on a weak spot that we see from the numbers and the data. I always love. And then, yeah, so far in spring, it's looked pretty good. A 3.12 ERA, a 0.81 WHIP. That's over 8 2/3 innings. He does not have a rotation spot secured, so that's a big factor. And if that was to get announced, I'm sure his ADP would jump up a little bit from 246 to maybe like 220 and change or something like that. But Kenta Maeda is one of the ones battling there, and Maeda has not had a good spring. He's just not the pitcher Job is. And I think it's just a matter of if Detroit's going to get cute with like keeping him down, or if they want to do the whole, rookie incentives and actually get him up. But when you look at like what they've done with pitchers, whether it's Flaherty or Scooble or whoever it is, add in the ballpark, add in the division, add in 97-mile-per-hour fastball and a new secondary pitch that should take a strikeout rate from like pretty good to really good is the hope, is the gamble. I think we're kind of overlooking Job. Again, it's kind of post hype. So yeah, I've got him in TGFBI, I believe, as
Nice.
like an SP7. And yeah, I'm on the Job train this year.
I think you're onto something here, man. I think like, oh, he was this can't miss, can't wait for him to come up. Number one stash last year, number one stash last year. Then it was like, we got some data on his fastball. It's like, oh no, what's this? It's not great. Like, kind of dead zoney, even despite the 97-mile velocity. Oh, wait, well, how come there's no 30% strikeout rates in the minors? Like, what's going on here? Whereas, all summer and the year leading up, that's like number one pitching prospect in baseball, number one pitching prospect in baseball. So I think that, yeah, there's prospect fatigue even on a 22-year-old that has 4 MLB innings. Detroit made the playoffs last year. Like, they I know they didn't have like super big splashes in spring in the free agency, but they signed Gleyber Torres. That's like a win now move. They have a really good core of hitters that I've waxed poetically about all off
Right.
season.
A lot of good vibes in Detroit.
Yeah, there's
Like they're going
so
for it.
I don't see any reason why he shouldn't break camp with them. Like they brought him up last year. I really hope they don't play like a service time game with him. And I think that's a super good point that you bring up, man. Like it's so refreshing when guys come up and say like, yeah, I need to work on this to get more whiffs, and that's what like everyone was saying was or finish helping put away guys, which is everything that someone was saying um, from an outside perspective as an analyst, I'm sure internally too, their pitching development team. So like it's refreshing when the guys accepting to that and willing to work on things like that. Like there's so many times where you hear stories of guys that like like, I don't look at those numbers and just like brush off any outside,
Right.
not even
Advice.
criticism, just
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
yeah, just
Advice
like,
or whatever it is.
yeah, just like analysis. You hear so many stories of that too. So, I think that there's probably like, it's pretty shocking that Jackson Jobe is still going around. What
That's
is
what I'm
it?
saying. I just, yeah. I
He is going 246 in March draft. So super, super affordable. I think that there could
He's going
be,
after Jose Barrios, dude.
yeah, yeah. You know, Thomas Nesco, TJ Stats, our great friend who tweets out all these player cards, like he's still all in. Like he's going to be a star. Like there's nothing there that is missing really from that repertoire and him as a pitcher. So I think it's a great call. There probably should be more hype around Jackson Jobe, and I think maybe it's a bit of like over analysis and prospect fatigue that maybe we're not as hyped as we should be.
I know.
Jackson
Yeah,
Jobe.
I think so. So it's an interesting one. And it was awesome, by the way, to see his 3-pitch strikeout of Vlad Guerrero in
Yeah,
spring training, where it was 3
yeah,
straight, like high heat,
yeah.
and he got all hype after it. So yeah, I'm excited there. And yeah, I think again, this all just goes to show that I think pretty much every name we've talked about tonight, minus Christopher Sanchez, has been post pick 200. So it just goes to show the big picture, that you can wait and still grab a lot of these exciting names. But Steve, back over to you for you had Clay Holmes, Gavin Williams, Max Meyer. So this is your 4th before you get to your honorable mentions.
Gave a teaser. It's Marlins pitcher. I'm going with Ryan Weathers. He was on his way to a breakout last year. I think we talked about him. I know we were pretty excited about Ryan Weathers. He was really good up until he got hurt last year in 86 innings. The strikeout rate wasn't great, but the 3.63 ERA was good, and there was a lot of signs that he was on his way to a breakout. I think he can truly break out with these changes that have gone on, and his new repertoire that he's been showing in spring training. His fastball is sitting 98. It has much better shape than last year. It has now 18 to 19 inches of vertical break of IBV from the left-handed side. The shape comps for those from a lefty are like Cole Reagans, Garrett Crochet, Mackenzie Gore, all these lefties with elite high fastball velocities. But Ryan Weathers has better IVB than all of them. So, yeah, Crochet, Reagans, and Gore with better shape. Yeah, sign me up. His changeup looks absolutely elite with the more vert on the fastball. It's the change unaffected. There's that great differential where where you get those pitching ninja gifts and overlays of the fastball and the changeup looking exactly the same till 10 feet from the plate, and one shoots up to the top of the zone, the other drops all the way off the plate, and pitchers look silly. He added a gyro slider, which is absolutely awesome. But yeah, Weathers is another one that I'm sure the month-over-month ADP for him is absolutely, he's still going at 322, but it was
He's
much
not.
later than that in February. And I'm sure as we get to these main event drafts and then TGFBI wraps up, like Weathers is going to be, within the top 300 for sure.
Min
Especially if he
pick,
continues
yeah.
to sit around 98, 99, where he was 96 last year.
Min pick is 226, and
Yeah.
I'm kind of curious if that was in my draft because he went
Dude, it might have been in
super
mine
early
too.
in mine.
I was, it was super early in my. I was pretty bummed when he went in my
I was
draft.
just scrolling for his name, and then I had to toggle on the like taken, already taken guys,
Yeah.
and it was like, oh man,
He was
somebody reached deep.
drafted by Kyle, of course, round 22, pick
There it
3.
is. There it is.
So, um, I don't have the math on that, but
Okay, he was round 19.
oh wow, so 3 rounds earlier for you.
Oh, and it was Esteval as well.
Yeah,
So
yeah, there you go.
so
There you go.
this
So
was
2 pitcherless guys
hold on.
grabbed him. He did, of course, this time he grabbed him
All right.
in
So
round 19. Yeah, that's got to be like close to the mid pick, if not
no,
the mid
okay,
pick.
so that's 273. So
Okay,
respect there. I thought it
so,
was even earlier than that. But yeah,
so Kyle
Weathers.
got him like around 300. That's really good
Yeah,
value
so
there.
price is going up. Yeah, he's an interesting one because we were interested when he was with the Padres and originally came up, but it was just a whole different pitcher. Like it's you forget that it's even the same guy because he was just more of a yeah, just kind of a oatmeal-y, like not a big K per nine type of thing. Like last year, the strikeouts started going up. And yeah, the ground ball thing has always been interesting, but the velocity and the shape there, it's I'm kind of curious what his comps are for, I guess, I mean,
He
the
looks like
Savant thing
Reagan's. He looks
mentions.
like Reagan's
Okay.
to me.
Yeah. Yeah. Lefty, 6'1". Yeah. Let me see. I guess Scooble's a little bit bigger than he is, but yeah, just interesting. So yeah, I think you don't have to pay much here, and it is a total scratch off with how good that fastball is. Like he's surging up the board. So yeah, I think he's a great. What do you think, Steve? Like, how? I guess that's a question for you. Is knowing that the ADP is rising, how early would you go looking at all the pitchers that are going around him? Like, where do you think
I
he
think
would
he's like
appropriately be priced?
in like a 12 team, standard daily move home league team. Like
Mm-hmm.
I think he's a great, last 3 rounds
Mm-hmm.
pitcher flyer.
Would you
Like
put him in front of Job, who's at 250?
I think so.
Okay. So then let's keep playing the game here. Yes, on Barrios. Okay. What about, well, then you get up to Clay Holmes 226, Luzardo 235. Does that feel like kind of the tier you like Weathers in?
No, I think there's some more injury concerns with Weathers too.
Okay. So you like
So
him somewhere in that like
yeah, I think I
240s.
like him around like
Okay.
250. Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Brandon Woodruff is there, who he's an honorable mention for me, but just way different than all the other names. Okay, no, that's a great one. My last one here, it was going to be Cody Bradford before the injury. Another one that I was excited about the extension, and it looked like he had that rotation spot. I know they haven't ruled it out; it's still an option. So honorable mention to Cody Bradford, but I switched over to Dustin May, and I think the theme from this show for Dustin May is post hype and just fatigue on the name, because right now in the month of March, Dustin May's ADP is 371, and it's just crazy to me, honestly. Like we've all seen Dustin May make batters look silly on Pitching Ninja. Like he is one of, I think honestly, like of the top 10 nastiest pitches I've ever seen. I think Dustin May is up there in my mind with that like cutting into right, like jamming righties, and like the movement of it is so nasty. And the fact that Dustin May has a spot in the Dodgers rotation without really anyone breathing on his neck, I think pending, fingers crossed, knock on wood, pending health, we're going to see Dustin May have a chance to get the best rhythm that he's ever had in his career. And he still throws a 97-mile-per-hour sinker. He still has 4 pitches, including a cutter for lefties. And ADP in like the 370s. It's just, he's going to get wins. He is going to throw like every 5 days. I know the Dodgers do weird stuff, but Dustin May, and honestly, this is a tricky one because I love Dustin May so much that if he did get blown up the first start, I don't think I would drop him, because I really just believe in the pitcher and just don't think he's had a chance to like fully work back up to as nasty as he was in 2021 when he had 35 strikeouts in 23 innings. Like he was breaking the internet and he had all this buzz, and then he gets injured and he never gets a full run. But now, like with the Dodgers and him being 6'6", good extension, amazing velocity, amazing repertoire. Like I know some of the whiff rates need to climb back up to where they used to be, but I think it's in there, and I don't think you have to pay it all for it. So I think Dustin May, for me, belongs much higher. Like I think he is probably fits around Reese Olson for me. Like that zone feels way better, and that's a full 100 picks and change higher than where he is on the board right now. So yeah, I'm in on Dustin May, Steve. You won't have to invest much, but I think it's just nuts to picture a Dodgers pitcher that we were all geeking out about like 2 or 3 years ago having run and not having hype.
Yeah, I mean that was 4 years ago now in 2021. So
You think he's washed?
like no, I hear you, and I am in love with those Dustin May gifts too, and feel like he's when you watch him, just the nastiest guy you've ever seen throw. But I think on top of that, outside of that 2021 stretch where he had the 23 innings and looked like he was on his way to becoming an ace, and eventually needed, Tommy John. I think that was the year. Um, he
But he's
never
never been
translate. He never
bad.
translated that to even like an a above average strikeout rate, right? Like the strikeout rates throughout his career, 23, 20, 38, 23, 18. And those are all small samples. He's never thrown more than the 56 innings in 2020. That was when he made 10 starts in the COVID season.
Hey, this
9
spring,
starts. What's that?
this spring, he's striking guys out though.
Yeah, 27.3%. I mean, it's still just a 10.2% swing strike rate, which in 2021 he had the 14.1, which is really good. 2022, 13%, really good. Last year, just 6% swing strike rate. Like, how does a guy like Dustin May have this much nasty stuff and only have a 6% swing strike rate? Where the difference between swing strike rate and whiff rate, swing strike rate, the denominator is pitches, whiff rate, the denominator is swings, just to clarify that there. So, once you get up to like the 13% for swing strike rate, that's really good. Yeah, I'm with you. Like, I want this to happen. I believe it can happen. It should happen watching him. Just the fact that he's never thrown more than 56 innings at the major league level. I know there's been some freak injuries too, right? Like he cut his
Mhm.
esophagus on a piece of salad or something
Yeah,
last
that
year.
it's completely
Just
yeah, right.
absolutely insane. Like the worst
Unrelated.
luck ever.
And
Uh,
before that, it was TJ. So it's
yeah,
like you're gonna tread lightly. Like it's never Dustin May's recovery from TJ, especially at his young age. You have to be viewing that as like protecting a franchise asset. Like I
yeah.
just feel like he hasn't let it rip
I
since
mean,
then.
now
But
he's in arbitration. I think it's like his last year. Like I think he's a free agent in 2026. Like it's crazy how quickly. Like now it's like, yeah, you protect him, but for what? You have one more year.
mhm.
So uh, I'm with you. I think that especially at the price, like it's absolutely worth it.
Oh, it's totally
Like
free.
they basically announced last week that May was going to have the fifth start after Bob Miller was sent down. Um, and there really hasn't been um, an insane price jump here in March. So it's still very affordable. Think it's definitely worth a flyer in the last few rounds of draft. I wouldn't bump him to like that Reese Olson range just because of all these factors that go against him with the innings and the lack of swing and miss despite the electric stuff. Um,
Mhm.
but I could definitely see him, uh, bouncing back and becoming very relevant again for sure. So I think it's absolutely worth a late round flyer and could definitely see him as a breakout pick.
And last justification is while it's been since 2021 that he's had that swing and miss stuff, it's not like he's gotten like, you know, pummeled from a ratio
No,
standpoint. Like,
no, he's still
he
been an effective pitcher.
effective
Yeah,
pitcher.
yeah.
Right,
I
right.
mean, he had a
So
450 year in 30 innings in 2022, but other than that, it's they've all been under 3 as a
yeah,
ERA.
with a sub one whip. Yeah,
Yeah,
like I think yeah, there's
he does
just
something right. Yeah,
yeah, when in doubt, bet on the Dodgers.
yeah.
There is the close for that. But okay, Steve, time to throw out some honorable mentions if there's any ones you want to punch in on here.
Yeah. Names I had listed here: Jack Leiter. I'm super excited about him. Another guy who's like revamped his arsenal and added a bunch of pitches to it. Casey Mize. I am ready to get hurt again with Casey Mize. Looks like he changed some mechanics, getting better ride on his fastball, better velocity. Slider looks like it actually could be a useful weapon there, and we know that the split finger could be elite. That's what led him to be a number one pick. Grant Holmes, I think, is very
Yes,
interesting.
yes,
I think that he had a great run as a starter last year, and I think, um, yeah, with Strider a little bit delayed, I think he's going to have a bit of an option here. Um, Jared Jones, I know that's kind of weird for a breakout pick, but he had the sinker. I think that's another thing that could, help with that home run problem that he had last year and get him down from like that 4 ERA after his, rough second half. and home run issues. I think that could be something that, two hard pitches can kind of keep those hitters guessing with that elite fastball. And the sinker looks good in spring training. So I could see Jared Jones like taking the SP1 step this year. And a super, super deep sleeper that may not even have a rotation spot is Kyle Hart. He was a KBO guy, won the KBO Cy Young last year, signed with the Padres, could potentially be a fifth man starter, like kind of like a Miles Mikolas and like Merrill Kelly sort of go overseas, come back, a revamp pitcher, and be someone interesting there. So those are another guys, and then one last one, Chris Bubich. I know Nick Pollock's been hyping him up a bunch. Foolish Bailey had him on one of his videos. He had that elite slider out of the bullpen, and looks like he's going to be a starter for the Royals. So Chris Bubich is another name to keep an eye on. So
Bubich had that insane little run before he got injured.
Yeah, he did. He looked like he was on his way to breaking out and then got hurt, and now he's
was that
back.
Was that last season?
I think it was the start of 2023, I believe, and then I think it was TJ. Let me say, good radio here. No, it was the start of last year. It was 2024.
Okay.
So yeah, he had actually no, it was 2023. Yeah, because the 30 innings with the 32% strikeout rate were relief innings last year. In 27 games, he did have the 3 starts in 2023 where he had a 3.94 ERA and 14.7% swing strike rate, and looked like he was potentially breaking out. But he did amazing in the bullpen last year, threw 2 ticks harder. Looks like maybe it could stick in the rotation this year. So Chris Bubich is another name that I like.
I like that.
So hopefully with all those names I just gave and the 4 guys that I went deep dive into, hopefully there's one there.
Yep. We mentioned Luzardo. He's been one. I know he got brought up in the chat as well. I think there's a great case to be made for that. I still think Woodruff, #old man squad with Jeffrey Springs are names that I'm interested in seeing different breakout, because I don't know that they would have the ascent into like acedom that some of these names could be, but I think that in terms of outperforming their ADP quite a bit, I think both of those guys have a real shot at it. We talked about a ton of these other ones. A name that I saw on your squad, Steve, that we haven't talked about, that we talked about a ton last year, is David Festa. What's he been up to in spring?
I know he added a new pitch too. I think he's looked pretty good. I know our boy TJ Stats, who got us onto David Festa, has been interested. Yeah, he's got a 25% strikeout rate, a 2.8% walk rate in 8 innings. So 18.4% swing strike rate.
I mean,
that is nice. But sorry, that comes with a 10.313 ERA. So
that's all right. That's all right.
All good. Good thing the spring stat ERA and earned runs don't count. So
because Festa, in the minors in 23 had a 30% K rate. And then in AAA last year, a 35% K rate. I guess another question.
He added a sinker. That's the new pitch that he has this year that our boy TJ has pumped.
Might be sleeping on Festa a little bit, but the problem is the rotation spot.
Let's see where Roster Resource has them.
He's in the battle. That's crowded, man. Chris Paddock, Woods Richardson. Come on, man.
I think he's better than Paddock and Woods Richardson.
Yeah, I do too.
So, and I know that Zevy Matthews also is an interesting name, but I believe he got hurt. Like fielding a ground ball. I think he had his knee injury. So, I think Festa's a good name to throw on there as an honorable mention too.
Okay. All right. Well, Steve, do we? I know we're running longer than usual. Do we want to table it, or do we want to get?
No, let's go into it. I think.
All right, we'll get into it, but we'll. That's the end of the breakout pitchers. We'll talk about our draft recaps, because this is the episode. But we're going to take our third ad break. We'll be right back after this. All right. Got to catch our breath on that, Steve. But yeah, what a great way to exhale by looking at a full draft board. So we're starting with yours, and this is TGFBI, right?
Yeah, this is
Okay.
TGFBI.
Talk to me about the slot you were in, what how the build started, maybe some of your favorite picks. Let's just hear it all.
Yeah, so I was in the third slot here. Got the draft board up on the stream, so you can see it there. I was pretty set on wanting one of the first three picks. I think that's the KDS, the Kentucky Derby style order that I've been setting for most drafts is
Mm-hmm.
1 through 3. Honestly, I've been leaving it like 1 through 15 in a lot just because I do like the first three picks, and then I prefer maybe the turn, but not so much that I feel like I need to change my order. So I ended up getting third, and went with Aaron Judge third. I think it was pretty chalk for the first three picks was Otani, Witt, then Judge. Then followed it up with Riley, Garrett Trochet, and Johan Duran in my first 4 rounds. I've that's kind of been like my standard build, at least in weekly NFBC leagues, and my draft and hold. It's been like two hitters,
Earlier
um,
ace.
a pitcher, and then a closer. I've just found myself in previous leagues struggling in saves, so I wanted to get one of those closers, and Duran is like the last one that I've wanted there. I had like Felix Batista queued up there, and he went the pick before me. I was actually on the tail end of a closer run. If you look at that round,
Yeah, I was just about to
um,
say, holy smokes, man. I got Duran
all in
around
fourth,
later. I see
yeah,
why you did it.
Diaz, Mason Miller, Clase, Iglesias, Helsley, Munoz, all in a row from the fourth pick of the fourth round to like the 10th pick of the fourth round. So absolutely crazy. Brian Reynolds went in between, then two more closers. So I just wanted to make sure I got one of those guys there. Um, with that, I felt I was a little light on speed and didn't really address that in the next few rounds with Albies, Christian Walker, and Will Smith. I've also been trying to get a catcher a little bit earlier just because in two catcher leagues with weekly moves, I just want to have the plate appearances there. I know that normally in daily leagues or in my home league, I'll never draft a catcher that early, but I do want one of the guys that is going to be a starter all year long, knock on wood, assuming health. Um, I did get Walker before the oblique news, but he does look like he's okay,
Mm-hmm.
um, and should be okay the MRI came back clean and everything, so I think I'm okay there. Um, and
I
then
think
I
Will
went,
Smith's been talking about some nagging injury thing he's been working through, which has everybody interested in that. What is it? Dalton Rushing? The
yeah. So and I also took Francisco Alvarez in round 12. So great, my two starting catchers that I invested heavily in are already hurt. Alvarez is out for 6 to 8 weeks with that hamate surgery, so not great news there for spending. I wanted to be, to get two catchers. I think I got two catchers before anybody else.
Smith is
Uh,
playing though. He's playing.
yeah,
He
he's
just he
playing.
just
He's playing.
admitted that he has been struggling through an ankle issue for like
Yeah,
a while. But I
yeah.
mean,
And who knows that he did have a bit of a down year last year, so maybe
yeah,
that played some role in it. And catchers, Will Smith has played a lot of baseball and a lot of
yeah,
catching over the last few years, so
yeah, for sure.
it can catch up.
Hmm.
Hunter Brown,
Hunter Brown.
my second pitcher in round 8. Pretty excited about that. And then a guy that I've kind of been, I think I have 2 or 3 shares of in like my 6 leagues or so that I've done. Ezekiel Tovar in the ninth. I think he's a great five
Interesting.
by five player. Like he gets knocked because he doesn't walk, but
Who
he doesn't have the
cares?
best plate discipline. But hey, he hits for average, he hits for power. Has elite defense, plays half his games in Colorado.
Yeah.
I think shortstop is a top heavy position. And I think Tovar is a solid fallback option for, I didn't get one of the big names early on in the first 4 rounds. There's really a fall off between that. And then there's like Adames and Bo Bichette go.
Hmm.
And then I got Tovar after that, who I think I like as much as Adame Sambo Bichette. So
Yeah,
um,
I do too. I almost got him. I did the same thing, Steve, where I was in a pinch for shortstop, but I was so light on speed at that time,
yeah, I
and
am
Tovar
too. I am
fell.
too at this time. Yeah.
I went with Volpe, and I didn't know how I felt
Okay.
about it,
Yeah.
but I just and honestly, I kind of kicked myself because the later I got in the rounds, I was like, "Well, man, here's the cheap speed." I just didn't know
Yeah.
some of those guys were gonna hang to like the value that they did. So I was kind of kicking myself. I totally would have swapped if I would have known the rest of my roster and done Tovar over Volpe. But yeah, I like that pick. I think he's in the auction calculator, which was my Bible as I went through
Mhm.
this draft. Likes Tovar as well in 5x5. So yeah, I
Yeah.
think your gut is spot on there.
Then I realized I was light on speed, light on outfielders because I just had Judge and didn't take any other outfielders. So I went with Pete Crow Armstrong in the 10th. He's been crushing it this spring. We all know how good he was in the second half. Should be a good option for at the very least, speed. So was fine with taking that there. Then I went Ryan Pepiot as my third starter. We know how much this podcast and Pitcher List loves Pepiot. Francisco Alvarez talked about Colton Cowser. Shout out to Uncle Ted in the chat as my third outfielder, the righty masher in Baltimore. Um, Kyle Finnegan, I think,
It's a good closer pick.
yeah.
Yeah.
I actually got a share of Kyle Finnegan in like a draft and hold in December before he signed, like super, super late. And I'm super pumped that he signed back with the Nationals and should just have that closer job
Mm-hmm.
again. So um I think that's
That's a good
with
grab.
Yohan Duran, it's a good base for speed.
Or
Elliot
saves.
Ramos was my 15th round pick. Um
I like it, man. I
yeah,
like Ramos, dude.
Kyle
He's a mystery box with that
Kyle
bat
Bland,
speed.
who's in this league, was sniped there.
Oh,
Um
I'm glad to hear that because that's
yeah,
what I was telling you that
yeah,
on Bland's bat speed acceleration stat
yeah,
that takes the overall bat speed and the swing length because you want a small swing length but a quick bat speed.
yeah.
And when you pair those together, which Kyle did on his uh, Streamlit app that you guys can get through PL Pro, Heliot Ramos was like number one all season. And I was like, it'll be interesting to see with this new metric if that translates to him just being like a monster because it's not an easy place to hit for power. And he did it last year pretty well. So I like
Yeah,
it.
yeah, and 17 through 19 kind of rounded out my MI and OF with Newtbar, Muncie, and Morel. Muncie, I think, kind of was
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
traditional Max Muncie and half season last year. Morel, I think some of that post hype, especially in Tampa, they can always get the best out of those guys. They targeted him in that trade for Paredes. They'll be in, the hitter friendly ballpark outside in Tampa. I think Morel could, last year we talked about, oh, Morel, the breakout's coming, it's coming, patient, and it never did. Maybe it'll just come this year. And I could see him being
Mm-hmm.
a nice power speed combo. And the last three pitchers I took, because we just went through round 22 in this, was Mackenzie Gore, David Festa, Jose Soriano, and Tobias Myers. Tobias Myers is a bit of a ode to you there, Van. I think it's, not the sexiest name in round 22, but
Yeah.
I think it's
Stabilizer.
a stable innings eater to balance out some of the Sorianos, Festas that may not have
Yeah.
the innings but have more upside. I
Mm-hmm.
think Myers is a good pick there.
I was looking at your team overall, Steve, and wondering if you were hurting on batting average, just with Riley. Albies is kind of a mystery box. Tovar's good, but 270. And then it's like you go to Judge at the very top. That's a great foundation for
Mm-hmm.
average that makes you afford Muncie and Morel a little bit. But I
And
still
guys
think,
like
yeah.
Crow Armstrong, Cowser could have lower average. Walker,
Mm-hmm,
lower average. I kind of punt batting average. Maybe that's a detriment of mine, but like it's just something that uh, it's not never in the top of my mind. You know what? This build could have used like a Stephen Kwan or
mm-hmm.
Luis Arias.
Mhm,
Honestly, I think
but you
that's a
got
good
your
point.
pop. You got your
Yeah,
pop, and
yeah,
then what's your speed? You got, Albies,
definitely light on speed too.
a little like
Albies, I
Crow
would project
Armstrong
for
is good
10.
there.
Crow Armstrong, I think I could project for 30.
Yeah, you
Newtbar
might need to
should be able
find
to
a
pitch in
rabbit on
10.
the wire type
Yeah,
thing.
yeah. I was looking at Dylan Moore too, and Kyle Bland sniped me on that. But
I saw you guys
um,
messaging.
yeah,
Yeah.
I definitely could use some speed and may struggle a bit in batting average, but who knows? I think maybe some of these guys could not be as bad of a debt. Like I think Albies could be a 270 hitter. I think Walker could probably maybe hit a little bit better in Houston there.
Hmm.
So who knows? And
Yeah.
maybe Crow Armstrong, these swing and miss gains are not as bad as we think here, or their gains from from spring training
Hmm.
carry over to the season.
I
Let's
do.
look at your team though. Now enough about
Oh
my team.
man. Well, the story to start is I had not set my KDS
Mm.
like a dum dum, and Sporer, who I had to send him a DM because Mr. Paul Sporer was in this league, and we had him on a great Christmas episode a couple years back. He was hilarious, so I shot him a note, and he responded. He was like, "Who you liking it for, man? Like, did you pick that spot? Were you high on it?" And I was like, "You know what, Paul? No, I'm not. My KDS would have been top 3 and then flip me to the swing on the back end." So I was right away like, oh man, Ellie is not my favorite on just going that speed heavy when speed is kind of plentiful later on. And then it was like, I just had Jose Ramirez for like 2 or 3 years in these industry leagues. And
Mhm.
I feel like it's so vanilla. So then I was like, do I want Soto, Tucker? So that's where I was like, all right, let me go to the auction calculator, take my heart out of this and like see what the valuations are. And I was shocked to find that the number 4 highest dollar value on the auction calculator for the league settings for the 15 team for the 5x5 was Tarek Skubal. And I messaged Spore when he was asking me who I liked. I go, I'm either going to go super vanilla with J Ram, or I think I might just light the chaos torch and go with Skubal. And I did. And as soon as I did, I was like, I can't believe I just did that. It's nothing like I have not thought about that as a strategy for longer than 5 seconds. So right away, my approach was tilted. And of course, I got flack from you guys in the Discord chat as well. But from there, I doubled down, Steve, and took your favorite Ketel Marte second round to get second base out of the way. So then I had this weird, like, kind of balanced hitter and the ace, which I don't even hate having Scuba. Like there was something refreshing about like, okay, now I can just grab bats
Yeah.
and not feel this pressure to do like the 6th round. And I really do think any of those guys could, like Garrett Crochet could, DeGrom could. There's so many of these that could, but I think Scooble is one that of the very small number that you expect it. Like I think Scooble and Wheeler are the 2 that you kind of expect it, and everybody else, it's like this argument that it could be a top 3 season. So anyway, but that's where I started with Scooble, Ketel Marte, but Marte is not like a mega standout in any category. He's just like a minus or B plus in 4 categories. So I knew I needed some pop with Matt Olson in the 3rd round. I looked at Riley. I looked at Olson. That was a tough one between 3rd and 1st, but ultimately I thought maybe I'll wait and get Isak Paredes or something. So I went Olson at 1st. And then I did the same and wanted to just address catcher early on to not have the headache in a 2-catcher league. It was another auction calculator inspired one. I got Sal Perez, again, trying to kind of knowing that you miss out on those 1st round bats. I was trying to catch up with like pop in a position that no one else would have, the possibility of like 30 seemingly. So I went Sal Perez, and then Duran was there. There were some closers going and stuff. So I was like, yep, I'm same page as you, Steve. I'm sick of the 7th place finishes and being dead last in saves and getting outbid on the wire. So I was like, all right, I'm taking my medicine. And then I got Jordan Westberg, who was 2nd or 3rd eligible, which was kind of nice
Yeah,
to
it's
have some
nice.
flexibility there. And also I like Westberg in general. He's kind of grown on me throughout the season.
Now,
Was
oh,
in
okay.
on him two
I was
years
going to
ago.
ask you if Matt McLean went 1 pick before. Did you have him in your queue at all? Like, I think that's
No,
an interesting toss up with
no,
McLean versus Westberg.
I've got Westberg over McLean.
Okay. Yeah.
Um, I think there's a lot to like, and I love the team context. I love the ballpark. I love the batted ball skills. Like he just kind of feels similar to how I felt about Gunnar of just like, yeah, he kind of seems like a stud, but can he turn the corner? Like, I know he wasn't as big of a prospect, but there was a time, remember, right when Westberg got called up, he was like Eric Cross #1 prospect to stash. Like, he was a big name. And last year, all the batted ball data looked awesome. He's still young enough to where I think he can take a step forward. So this is a little bit early in the 6th round, but I liked it. Then I went Riley Green. Steve is my OF1. And
Nice.
I
There you
ended up,
go.
so I was late to the outfield party in round 7. So that's why I grabbed Nemo and Edman like 3 rounds later and 4 rounds later. So I went from having no outfielders to picking 3 in the next 5 rounds.
What made you go Green over Yelich and Bellinger, the next 2 outfielders that went?
Yeah, I think that
Me?
well, yeah, I mean, it was a recency bias. I think I like the pop with Riley Green. I think Bellinger was a thought, and I think maybe I'm being a little bit harsh on Belly with the short porch. Like, I know that I brought that up on I think it was with Ryan Bloomfield when he was on, and I was saying, yeah, of the past 3 years, like, I don't think I'm buying the Belly breakout, but it is a good match for him. I just think that Riley Green is average in power, which is a tough combo to get this late. So yeah, I went Green, and then Logan Webb after that. So Scooble, then SP2 was Webb. I'm on the record quite a bit saying I like Webb for his stability and volume there. Then I mentioned Volpe was for the speed to backfill. Nimmo, I like, if he can get through these kind of injury scares, I think that the power speed, like 2020 type of thing is very possible for him. Tommy Edman was just kind of backfilling speed because up until this point, I didn't really have any. And then after that, was when I went Christopher Sanchez as my SP3. Saves with Justin Martinez, but that is a second closer, is not a sure bet with
I
Puck.
love Justin Martinez. I've been early on, I was able to grab Justin Martinez and AJ Puck together in a lot of draft.
I know, and what's his face? Esteval sniped Puck because I wanted to handcuff it.
But now they've been going like in the same round. So it's harder to do that. And they did. Like you I'm sure you were lining him up maybe with your next pick, but he went essentially a round later. But I think Justin Martinez is nasty, and I think he's going to be one of the value picks for a closer. I'm fine with him as
good. I'm glad to hear,
as my
second
closer too. Yeah.
Yep. And then we're in the 14th round, and I was looking at starting pitching, and I went Eflin. I'm not thrilled about him this year, but it felt like 4 for floor. It felt too early to just take a shot at like a Woodruff or a Luzardo or somebody like we've been talking about. I think even was Gavin Williams off the board?
He went before that.
Yeah.
He went a few picks before that. Yeah.
So it was kind of Eflin just kind of fell, and I was like, you know what?
To our boy Paul Spohr. So
there you go. There you go. Spohr was on it. And then from there, I was just I will say, by taking Scooble first, it influenced the rest of my draft in that anytime I could find kind of what I viewed as bankable value, or just like back of the baseball card value, but at the risk of sizzle, I was doing that. Like I rounded out my outfield with Cedric Mullins, who I do think is undervalued, but it's not like a fun, sexy pick. And then right after that, I went Lourdes Gurriel, who he was, just for what it's worth, he was well above every other name I was looking at on the auction calculator. And I think it's because he's got like 155 runs in RBI, like that late in the draft, to find somebody who's like projected for 85 runs or something. Like he was solid. And again, it's like, I'm not flipping on MLB TV to watch Lourdes Gurriel because he's on my team. But I did that. And then afterwards, I finally got a pick I could sink my teeth into with Tyler Fitzgerald. It had felt like I had taken my medicine with Mullins and Gurriel. So I went went T Fitz there for hopefully a little power speed. Had some average floor with some of the earlier guys like Riley Green and Ketel Marte. And then rounded out with Jackson Jobe, just some kind of shameless pop with Reese Hoskins as a CI, and then Dustin May is my most recent pick. So like the staff that it's 4 floor guys, and then it starts to get fun with like Jobe and Dustin May. But yeah, reached a little bit there too, because I didn't want to leave the draft without May, like I talked about earlier. So yeah, that's where I'm at. I don't hate it. I think it's been a long recovery to skip a bat in the first round. But it was nice to be able to get 9 batters out of the next 10 rounds.
Yeah, that's nice. You set it and forget it. I can't force myself to leave the draft without a first round hitter. I don't know. I just can't. I can't do it. But props for you for pulling it off. I think you pulled it off well. So I like it. Where are you currently? We're in the last round. I have one more pick remaining. TGFBI.
You guys are ahead of us. We are. Let me get to the draft room here. I think we are in like the middle of the 21st. So
okay, so
yeah, what I
said
was
far behind.
Yeah.
I know there were some. I know Yancey was like tweeting about how he was in round 15 today to start, like just plodding along. Like
Yancey's in my Raz Slam as well.
Nice. Yeah. In Raz Slam, we're in the 24th, so that's also moving pretty good. So
nice.
Should be done with these. And then the Raz Slam goes much later, right? Because it goes 42, whereas TGFBI is 30. So
it does, but it goes quicker. Yeah,
it goes quicker. Yeah,
we're in the 22nd round for Raz
Slam. You're moving along too.
Yeah.
So it's exciting stuff. TGFBI almost done. That's it. And we got,
huge,
dude. The next time we talk, we'll be talking about real games.
That's right. So yeah, we'll be back next Wednesday, and we'll have some games to talk about. I'll do my best to keep it off the show, Steve, but I'll tell you all about how the draft goes tomorrow.
Yeah.
I gotta share my dad's quote. I say it every year, but regarding the draft day, some days in life are worth repeating, and it's always been something we quote because it's like Christmas, and it's one of the best days of the year. But when you go there, all the traditions are the same, all the banter is the same, the feeling's the same, and you're like, doesn't this ever get old? And you're like, no, it doesn't. This is what it's all about.
Home league draft is the best day of the year. It's like Christmas. That's what one of our buddies says. It's like Christmas Eve and Christmas morning on draft day. You're doing it on a week, on a school night. You take off Friday or anything?
We do half day Fridays.
Okay.
So they're always light. Work from home, half day. But yeah, there's going to be a lot of banter revved up. I'm picking from the 9 slot. So
are you guys like fully remote, or you guys go anywhere for
We'll
it,
have like 9 people. We got a little
nice.
back room at a awesome like Greek bar and grill, sports bar and grill. They got like a private room with the TVs, and they give it to us for free every year. And nowadays they come in and they're like, "Do you guys want any free shots or anything?" And we're like, "Come on, baby." So yeah, it's gonna be a great night. I will definitely text you updates. But for those of you who
what pick do you have? What pick?
Ninth. So yeah, it's one of those where it's like, you don't know who's gonna make it. You're just kind of letting I'll be playing chess throughout the whole draft. And last year, my God, dude, the pitching run, I know I shared it with you, but it was to a point where like, I think, I should have some of this stuff in front of me, but like a guy whose ADP was like 195 as a pitcher was going at like 97. Like it was a pitching surge like never before. And that's why I backed
That's like main event NFBC.
It was nuts, dude.
Surge, yeah.
So in the room, I had to pivot and do the Marmol strategy and just grab relievers. And I didn't take a starter until most teams in the league had like 4. And I was just like,
it worked out for you, right?
It worked out. Yeah. Finished 3rd in regular season, like semis and everything. So yeah, we'll see, man. But we're here. We did it.
Awesome stuff. Yeah. Everyone enjoy your drafts as they come in. Excited to talk about baseball, but yeah, this is it. We're in the home stretch. Real baseball very, very soon.
Yes, indeed. Thank you guys for joining us on the 100-minute episode here. If you made it this far, it is always greatly appreciated if you guys can go out and give us a rating and review. They go a long way. We don't get a ton of those, even though Pitcher List as a site has a huge following. It means a lot. But otherwise, we will be here every single Wednesday night throughout the season. So would love you guys join on the stream, pop in with questions. If not, the podcast coming out on Thursday. But cannot wait. Draft season is upon us. And thank you guys for listening. And thanks for talking baseball with us.
Thanks, guys. Later.